I'm DigiBro, and this is the Rant Hole, where I rant about whatever my $15 plus a month patrons ask me to rant about. That could be you, if you wanted it to. This one's from Ugu Games, who says, how about your thoughts on the episode Darmok, if you have seen it? Star Trek The Next Generation Season 5 Episode 2, Metaphor, or in modern lexicon, Trope-Based language. I haven't seen this episode, but I guess I can talk about metaphor and trope-based language to some extent. I mean, I'm somebody who likes to speak a lot in metaphors and tropes. I think it's sort of a shorthand for communicating, a broad swath of ideas in a small amount of way. It's a way for you to sort of take all the experiences that you've had and gather them and package them in a way that other people can understand it without having to have all of those experiences. And I've been giving a lot of thought to the way that I communicate lately, and just the fact that I think that I draw a lot of connections between things that I don't necessarily know how to easily express what I am seeing. Because when let's say you watch 100 movies, and there's something that connects them all in your mind, but you don't know how to express that to somebody else because there's no word for it necessarily. There's no way of describing this trend other than to, very literally describe what happened in all those movies and then, ascribe a word to it. But, if you come up with some way of explaining it to other people that they don't have to watch it to get it, you can, metaphorically or tropically, condense all that information into something that other people can understand just by hearing you say it without having to consume all of that stuff. I mean, I suppose this is kind of just how words work in general, is that we see something, we try to describe it, and, kind of come up with something that we can use to describe it, and then if enough people hear that and pick up on it, they start using it as well. Words don't just exist. They don't exist in the ether. They have to be invented. They have to be spoken by a person and then repeated, and they only survive insofar as people continue to say them. There's lots of dead words. There's lots of history of words that have been left behind, and new words being created all the time based on new understandings. And it's not always easy to sell people on a word that maybe means something to you but means nothing to them. To, tell them hey, this thing that I'm trying to explain, in my mind, I have a clear picture of what this word means because I've been seeing it. I think, for an example, let's take the word deconstruction. That is sort of a trope, to deconstruct something, like a deconstructive piece of media. And it's something that people start using because they see a lot of it and they explain it to other people. But because of the fact that, not everyone has the same understanding of what that first person said, they might apply it to other things that seem in their minds to have that same connection, to be connected to the other things they've seen described that way, but in the other person's mind it might not be the same, and so I think that we find ourselves in a position where people have to often define how they define a word. You can't just always say the trope or say the metaphor and expect other people to understand it the same way you do, because we all think different. We all have different understandings. We all have different experiences. And while certain words have been so used by so many people in the same way that we all can easily understand what you're talking about, other words have been used so differently. This is why in particular, I'm not a fan of labels, especially for groups of people, because of the fact that your perception of a label will often depend on whom you've encountered who falls under that label, or who describes himself with that label. If I call myself, let's say, a feminist, for instance, that would be a complicated term to use because everyone who hears it is going to think something different about what I mean. Some people are going to say, well, this is what my perception of a feminist is based on, what I've consumed or what I've been told or what I've observed, whereas somebody else has a totally different explanation. And this is why I think it's so unreasonable sometimes when people will say things like, everyone should consider themselves a feminist, because if you care about women's rights, that makes you a feminist. And it's like, if everyone felt that way, it would, yeah, everyone should consider themselves that. But it's not interpreted that way by everybody. It's not a global understanding. It is it's something that we all have our own mental image of, and you really need to explain what you mean by it when you use the word. And at that point, it's no longer serving the purpose a word is supposed to serve, of condensing information into something that's easily digestible by the other person, because you are now having to extrapolate it to even use the word. So I think this is why some people get so defensive over words maintaining certain definitions, why, people really hate that the word ironic has come to mean in many, or no, even worse, literally, that so many people use the word literally to mean figuratively. And it drives some people crazy because they know that their speech is now going to mean something different to other people, because the word literally no longer means literally. It can now mean figuratively, and when you say literally, you don't know if the person you're talking to is going to understand, and now you have to explain yourself. Or you can let this happen and just change the way you use the word and use a different word when you want to mean the thing that you used to mean when you said that word, if this all makes sense. I don't know how much I'm really answering the question here, because I didn't bother watching this Star Trek episode because it's way farther in the show than I am, and quite frankly, the phrasing of this request was a little confusing, but hopefully me ranting about language was really what you wanted in the first place. Next rant.